Human beings are complex. And I have a fundamental premise, which is that everybody's just trying to do the best that they can. We're all just trying to do the best that we can, right? And life isn't easy. So what I really just try to do is just come alongside and really, really listen, and then in a safe way get people comfortable to get below the surface. One of the things that I think I've come to learn is that the presenting issue is rarely the real issue. People come to
Mm.
you and they want to, and like the presenting issue is not the issue. There's usually something else going on, and somehow, some way, we have to get there together.
Welcome to Leadership, the Secret Sauce, the podcast where we talk to extraordinary coaches and leaders to dive into the realms of leadership and coaching. We're your hosts, Dave Lipsky and Matt Dodson. So let's jump in with another guest and find out their answer to the question, what is your secret sauce? Welcome to Leadership, the Secret Sauce with coaches Dave Lipsky and Matt Dodson. A quick shout out to our sponsor, Character Matters Coaching and Consulting, where they believe that your character is the compass guiding you through life's journey. Whether you're facing personal or professional challenges, they are dedicated to helping you discover and strengthen the core values that define who you are. Dave, who do we have today?
Welcome, Joe Quagliata. And I am excited to have you on this morning. And I wanted to start out with an energy check-in on a scale from 1 to 10, 1 being low, 10 being high. What is your energy level, Joe, right now?
Oh, good morning, Matt and Dave. Great to be with you. So I'm north of 9.
North of 9.
I'm north of 9 for a few reasons. I'm staring out at a beautiful lake right now, so that's a nice thing. And I'm hanging out with a couple of coaches to talk about coaching. So, and I'm a morning person, and I have a large cup of coffee about 6 inches to my right. So I'm ready to go. I'm ready to rock and roll.
Fabulous. Coffee is my first choice, and then now I'm on to some vitamin water this morning. I feel like a little bit of a product endorsement. Didn't know I was going to do that, but Matt, what's your energy level at?
Yeah, I'm at probably 8.75, so just south of 9.
Since I started this with Matt, he's starting to use decimals with me because he knows how very specific I am and knows everything I do. Thank you, Matt. I'm thinking I'm about a 9 as well. I'm excited. Beautiful weather here in the Northeast. Like we're getting close to 75, 80 again, which is really odd for this October timeframe. We could be trick or treating with shorts on this year again. We'll see what happens.
Hey, that sounds normal in Texas. Yeah.
It's normal. It's normal in Texas, right, Matt?
I'm still walking around with shorts. I refuse to put long pants on. I'm in denial that winter is coming, Dave. So, I love the warm weather, and I'm sticking to my shorts as long as I can. So,
Yeah, no, I was pretty convinced in college that we can control weather if we kept wearing shorts.
right.
Except I started out in Oswego on Lake Ontario, and I lost that battle.
Lost the battle.
But so just to start with, I like Joe Q. I'm going with that for a second.
Go for it. I'm used to it.
It sounds very hip. So when you introduce yourself on a plane, train, or automobile, and somebody turns to you and says, Joe, what do you do? How do you describe it?
Great question. So I usually set that up with what I did for a minute to provide context for what I do now. So someone were to ask me, what do you do? I say, well, I spent many years in corporate world leadership. I spent over 3 decades in one place, American Express. Didn't plan it that way, and then I sort of had an inflection point, where I felt like it was time to make a change, and I moved into facilitating and coaching around leadership stuff. So I work with groups and individuals on leadership development. So that's the way I define what I do these days.
So I think we have some common connections back to Amex. We'll have to explore that.
Yeah.
I did some work in financial services, and some of my leaders went over there as well. Great organization. I'm going to turn it over to Matt for the first question.
Hey Joe, what is your secret sauce? If someone asks you that question, what makes you you?
That is such an interesting question. It kind of reminds me of a question that somebody asked the guy who was sitting on a park bench. It was this old guy, and he was sitting on a park bench, and he was kind of disheveled, looked like he had been there for a while, kind of unkempt. And they wanted to just find out who he was. And they said, who are you? And he said, I've been struggling with that question my entire life. Like, what's your secret sauce? Can I answer it with a quick story that'll set some context? Yeah.
Totally.
So when I hear secret sauce, I think of my mom. Mom left us 6.5 years ago at the ripe old age of 92. So I'm hoping that
Mm.
the gene pool passes down a
Nice.
generation.
Yeah.
But my mom made the absolute best sauce, pasta sauce. And being Italian, it's all about the sauce, right? And so when my wife and I got married, my wife's name is Robin. I said, Rob, could you do me a favor? Just do me one favor. Learn how to make my mom's sauce. I mean, like, I don't know what the secret is, but could you learn how to make her sauce? And by the way, I envy guys who can cook. Like, I can scramble eggs. That's about it. So I said, could you learn how to make my mom's sauce? So she reached out to my mom. She said, listen, I'd love to learn how to make your sauce. And my mom said, fine. She said, so next time we're over, can I just get your recipe? My mom said, what recipe? I don't have a recipe. What do you mean you don't have a recipe? So, well, I have a bunch of ingredients that I work with. Do you have them written down? Well, no, not really. Do you have measurements? No. But I'll tell you what I do. I mean, we have the tomatoes for the sauce. You have onions. You have garlic. You have, olive oil and cheese and basil, and you just start working with the ingredients. And what my mom would do is she'd had all these ingredients at her disposal, and she did it by feel. And as she was going along in the process, she would make adjustments. She'd do a taste test. Okay, it needs a little bit more cheese. And at the end of the day, I wish this was always the case with coaching. I mean, the end result was always outstanding, right? Wouldn't it
Mm.
be great if every coaching session ended like that was outstanding? That's not reality, but that's what we aim for. The point is that she had all of these ingredients that she was working with, but it was sort of like she would test along the way, and she would adjust to get to what she felt would be the best sort of finished product. So when I think about coaching, and when I think about what I try to be mindful of, is that in a way, the secret sauce is there is no one thing. There are a bunch of things. And so what I try to do is just be highly situationally aware. Maybe that would be the term to answer the question, which is situational awareness, which we could unpack, by the way, because I talk about this a lot. I want to be really situationally aware around what's going on, who I'm speaking with, what the context is. And then I have all of these sort of ingredients: question, metaphor, story, observation, silence, reframe, all this kind of stuff that I want to have ready so that I can create resonance with someone to move them along in some way.
That really actually, you said something that just made me so, okay, lots of tools, knowing when to use them. When did you know that that was you're given these tools? So how did you know, like, these tools are my secret sauce, or when, maybe it's when to use them is your secret sauce?
Well, it's a learning process. When I look back over my life and I look back over my career, coaching has always been in my repertoire, but the types of coaching were very, very different.
Mm.
So, for example, early in my career, most of my corporate work was around client-facing stuff, onboarding client relationships, or managing and growing client relationships was the majority of my work. So a lot of the coaching that I did early was skill-based coaching. There's an objective skill standard. For example, like I've gotten into pickleball recently, right? So I'm learning how to play pickleball. Okay, 3 injuries in 1 year, by the way. And so there's a certain set of skills around how to play pickleball, right? Or how
Mhm.
to hit a baseball. So that's like skill-based coaching. It was like, okay, there's an objective standard for, and then I'm going to coach against that standard in a skill-based way. And then the second sort of evolution of coaching for me was when I moved into leadership roles and I led teams and ultimately organizations. What I thought was coaching was really advising. It was more around, I have an issue, What's the issue? Listen, okay, here's what I would recommend. Here's what I think you should do. When I moved into this type of coaching, executive coaching, it was a major paradigm shift for me. Major paradigm shift. And it was hard in the beginning. And I attribute a lot of what I've been able to get to, at least at this point, to some of my mentor coaches like Sue Lawley and Kat Newberry, who are they're MCC level coaches that I did my training with. They have a firm called Creative Coaching Certification Partners. And they really help you to understand that, you have a whole bunch of tools, but you can't rely on any one. You can't rely on any one thing, because then you're making it about you. You've got a whole bunch of things, ingredients, if you will, right? And tools. And it's really trying to understanding your situation and saying, okay, what's going to help this individual in this situation right now? And it takes a lot of discipline. They talk about like the paradox of power. The power of coaching resides when the power is given to the client. So it's not about you and what you think you're good at. It's about what's going to help this person.
I really like that.
It's been a process. It's been a process for me.
I really like the sauce example you gave from your mom. And I just remember growing up with a lot of different sauces being made in my family. And my grandmother would turn to me and say, "Who's coming over?" And I'd say somebody. And she said, "Ah," and then she'd reach for a different spice.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you, in your coaching, how do you decide what spices, what tools, things you're going to reach for? Like, how do you connect that with the person that's in front of you?
Great question. So the visual that I would use is the visual of an iceberg. Think about an iceberg, right? So, and almost like look at an iceberg from the side for a moment, right? So you've got what's above the waterline, which is really the tip of the iceberg, right? And that's actions and behaviors. Those are the observable things, the things that we can see, visibly see, and the things that we actually hear that people say. And then below the waterline, where the mass is, are things like beliefs, assumptions, and experiences that people have. Everybody has a story, right? Each one of us has a story here. Where our family of origin, where we grew up, where we went to school, the people we hung out with, the things that have happened to us, great things, tough things, right? And so, from my perspective, and this is what I find so challenging about coaching, is the hard work is below the waterline. The hard work is the stuff that isn't easily seen, readily seen, beliefs, assumptions, experiences. And so what I really try to do is just try to work really, really hard below in terms of the stuff that's below the surface. And that's of course, listening, really, really listening, and really try to be situationally aware around, okay, what might be going on here, and then based upon what might be going on, what's appropriate in this situation.
Joe, one of the things that intrigues me about your story is we have a lot of listeners that would say, "Hey, I'm a leadership development professional and I want to be a coach," right? I don't want to continue to just facilitate these programs in a corporate setting or one on one or or in a group. How did you go, you know what? It is
Mhm.
really the coach that I really want to be. Because I would say that that would answer a lot of questions from a lot of listeners that would say, how do I get to that place? Like, what happened inside of you to say, okay, I'm moving below the waterline, and that's the place I want to be at.
Well, I would answer it this way. I think, Matt, I was 57 when I left corporate after 30, well, almost 35 years. I felt it was a very important inflection point for me. I was like, okay, I'm ready. I was looking out the window saying, I think there's something else for me. And so when I reflected on my body of work, two things were apparent to me. Number one is I love doing group work. So I do a lot of facilitation work because I love that. But I also want to do one-on-one work because when I reflected on sort of my years of leadership, it was the one-on-one stuff, right, with people, promoting people, career pathing people, mentoring people. And so that's what triggered the move into coaching for me,
Mm, yeah.
was the one-on-one work. And so, but what I really learned, and it was a very, very big shift for me, this type of coaching was a very, very big shift for me, is that it has to be client centered, and you can't operate under assumptions. You can't. Human beings are complex, and I have a fundamental premise, which is that everybody's just trying to do the best that they can. We're all just trying to do the best that we can, right? And life isn't easy. So what I really just try to do is just come alongside and really, really listen, and then in a safe way get people comfortable to get below the surface.
Mm,
One of the things that I think I've come to learn is that the presenting issue is rarely the real issue. People come to
mm,
you and they want to, and like the presenting issue is not the issue. There's usually something else going on, and somehow, some way, we have to get there together. That's where
mm.
the real work is. The hard work is below the surface.
Yeah.
Hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, totally. Actually, that really is helpful. And so I'm gonna keep going back to this, your leadership development, and you're looking at, so what do you think you would have wanted from a coach then, and now fast forward, what would you want from a coach now? So what changed? Like, what do you think you wanted? Like, personally, when I was doing leadership development, even doing internal coaching, what I wanted from a coach was to really challenge my assumptions, my thinking, even sort of be willing to actually go to, like, how did you get here? Where you're discontented with the way things, like, I wanted a coach that would be willing to. So if you back up, what do you think you
Yeah.
wanted from a coach then? And what do you want from a coach now?
Life was so different then, Matt and
Mhm.
Dave, for me. So to be clear, I was an organizational leader. I wasn't an L&D guy. I ran large sales organizations and client-facing organizations, right? But even more so today, what I just find, and that was the case then, and it's the case now, is people are under tremendous pressure. People are under tremendous performance pressure. And the rate and the pace of things is like never before. And it was then. So it was like coaching in that sense was problem, answer,
Mm,
problem, solution. What's next? So it was very results oriented. Whereas I think it was more around, okay, what's the issue and how do we resolve it? What's the answer?
mm,
But the type of work that we do as coaches within this sort of spectrum, what I would call sort of like the executive coaching kind of spectrum, is this is a time when hopefully you can come out of the hectic nature of your right, and just have a chance to breathe and have a chance to soak in things a little bit and go deeper. People don't have time. In my observation, you guys correct me if your observations are different, but people don't have time. Time is at such a premium now. People have time to think.
I think you're spot on.
So people don't have time to think. Life is very, very transactional, and people are fighting for their lives. It's like I'm in survival mode here. So the gift of coaching, I think, is giving people space to go deep.
Yeah, it's a great question of like, I remember thinking I didn't have time for anything. And it's always a challenge of like convincing somebody that they need to take time, right? You're just standing across from a client and you see them doing the same thing that I used to do, that maybe you used to do, and skipping over the water. And then you say, all right, like, time out for a second. Is this worth it to you? How do you engage a client in that conversation?
Well, the first thing that I try to do when I'm meeting with someone, and very often they're just like back to back to back to back. It's like I have a 9, I have a 10, I have an 11, I have a 12. I'll have my coach at 1 o'clock, right? Is how you doing? How are you showing up today? If there were a word that you could use that could describe how you feel right now, What would it be? What's going on? Do we need to take a few deep breaths together, maybe? Do some diaphragmatic breathing? Like let's do that together. Let's take 3 deep breaths. Ready? That kind of a thing. And just create a different environment for people to say this is different. This is different.
Yeah, being across from West Point, we've talked to some military folks, and I used to coach some soccer from some, and I'm just very interested in some of the generals that have taught. And one of the generals, his statement was, "Make it matter." Like make it matter, like what actually matters. And it's very interesting. There's a little bit of a shortage of that in kind of the corporate frenetic pace that you made present to me again. You reminded me of that.
Yeah, and so creating that safety. I just started working with a new client. You'd know the name of the company. I won't disclose it, but they're under tremendous, tremendous performance pressure. Like stock declined 24%. They're bleeding financially. A major corporate restructure was just announced. CEO change, and this individual, who's pretty senior, is in the middle of a lot of what needs to get done. And now, working with a coach. And so met with the person's leader and HR business partner, got feedback. I asked, what would you like me to do with this feedback as I begin to work with this individual? And they said, feel free to share. It's okay, with certain guardrails. First official coaching session, and we were talking, I say, do you want me to share some of what I've heard? And all of a sudden, the demeanor just changed. And she started to cry. Just the pressure, the absolute pressure of things. And now hearing, okay, I've got these areas that I've got to work on. And I just responded. I said, I want you to feel safe here. I want you to feel safe. And I want you to know that I'm going to do my best to walk with you through this together. And I'll be here for you however I can. So it's kind of that connection. People say, okay, this is going to be different for me. And
Yeah.
that's how you can get some real work done with people.
And chances are no one had that conversation with her.
No. Mm-mm.
Because they either want something or they're going to give her something that she'd asked for. And it is transactional. It's not a commitment to the person. It's a commitment to a task item, strategy, whatever it happens to be. I like that example.
All of which are important.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
of which are important, right?
But they're not coaching.
But they're not coaching. No, coaching
Right.
is distinct. Coaching is distinctly different. And what's been, it's been such a change for me is because I'm a driver. I want results. I ran organizations to drive results. And well, you know what, Joe? It's not about your results when you're coaching. It's not about the gold star. It's about being there for people and letting the process be what the process is going to be, and trusting the process. And that's been a shift for me. But it's made me, I think, a better person, better human being, I think.
Joe, you're really different. I mean, I would imagine in like a night and day shift, like from being sort of the organizational leader to moving to coach. I just wonder what your wife would like. Where did my husband go? Or boy, I'm glad he's changed. What was it? I would just what happened? Like when you feel these things shifting inside, like as you move towards a career in coaching, and do you find yourself going, that would have been old way?
No doubt. When we get to sort of potential things, reads for people, whatever, like Arthur Brooks wrote a book called From Strength to Strength. It's an outstanding book. And he talks about 2 types of intelligence. He talks about fluid intelligence and crystallized intelligence. Fluid intelligence it's just sort of like your natural giftedness. You're young, you have energy, you're sharp, your memory, right. And then what happens is you begin to make shifts in your life. And as you get older, you shift from fluid intelligence to crystallized intelligence, which is all about experience. Like I've lived a lot of life, I've seen a lot, I've experienced a lot. And maybe it's more of a wisdom through experience. And so, and I'm working with people and I'm saying, oh, I remember that. I remember when I went through that. Oh, I remember when I was there. And not leading with what they should do, but coaching with an understanding of, okay, I think I can connect with what this person's feeling right now, and maybe I can enter into this in a way that can create meaning and connection for them, so that they have hope and they can do something different that will move them along.
You have a fascinating story, Joe, and I hope our listeners really just appreciate listening, because I think some of them could relate to wanting to move into coaching as a result of a long career in leadership development or organizational leadership. Any other, what other resources would you recommend besides that Arthur Brooks book?
So there are a few. So I thought about three from a pure coaching perspective. Coactive coaching. I don't know if you guys have heard that book. It talks about listening and intuition and curiosity and empowered learning and sort of like thought partnership, coactive coaching, where you're sort of, you're in it together with your client. You're not carrying it as the coach, but it's a co-coaching kind of thing, coactive. So that's one, coactive coaching. I love Arthur Brooks, From Strength to Strength. And I bring that book up because, when you're at a point, and this may not apply to everyone, but when you're at a certain point in your life and you're beginning to feel like a shift needs to take place, okay? And I'm going to go from strength. I was here, I was doing these things and doing them really well, but it's time for a change now, to strength, from fluid intelligence to crystallized intelligence, and how you can leverage everything that you've learned along the way in a way that creates sort of maybe a different version of who you are with a different type of a contribution. And I think coaching is just such a perfect place for that. Such a perfect place. So From Strength to Strength would be another one. And then I have to go with my timeless one, which was published in 1989 and is still as applicable today as it was back then, which is Stephen Covey's The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Classic. Because he talks about inner disciplines, right? And he talks about outer disciplines, things like, seek first to understand, applies to coaching, synergize. You're working with your client, you're synergizing, right? In terms of 1+1 = 3. Talks about sharpening the saw, which is all about taking care of yourself, which is very important in coaching for you to be in a healthy place mentally, emotionally, spiritually, I would even say physically, to bring your best self to what you do. So I love the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and I think there's a lot of applicability to what we do as coaches in terms of what he unpacks in that book.
Yeah.
Timeless principle. Stuff that I learned. This is partly my reflection. So stuff that we went over, we became aware of. Like, I think I went to Utah, I don't know, 25 years ago. This is great stuff. We're going to teach this stuff. And then years later, I realized, wait, this is way deeper than the stuff I learned and I taught. And I think, Joe, what you reminded me of is when we are present to learning, it's kind of like that old thing of like the teacher appears when the student is ready, right? Mm-hmm. The coachee appears when the coach appears when the coachee or client is ready. And I think what I reflect on is the power in your approach to how do you get people to be present to those deeper principles for themselves, like earlier, before you get to the later stage. So thank you for reminding me of that.
It's human work. It's human work.
My reflection with you, Joe, is I wonder if I had encountered you while you were still an organizational leader, would I recognize you today? And that's actually, I find your growth as a human being the really the fascinating part of your story, and even how that would show up in a coaching conversation and giving leaders a chance to just stop. And we haven't talked about that on the show yet, but the pace at which leaders, clients are going is oftentimes, that coaching conversation is the respite in the crazy. So it reminded me that oftentimes is my role as a coach to slow things down to let them know that I'm going to actually partner with them and say, I'm not going anywhere. Let's just slow down together. But I have to slow down inside first in
Oh,
order
yeah.
to offer that.
No
I
question.
have to be willing to, like you said, all of those facets. It's the physical, emotional, spiritual, mental. I have to be willing to do that for my clients in advance of me showing up inside their door, because the crazy can overcome, like it'll actually just overwhelm the deep and abiding sort of like stillness I think that I see in you. So that was my that's my reflection.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you for that. Well, I mean, look, one of the biggest challenges, I'm going to be really honest with you, okay, is I tend to work with senior people in companies, and they got big jobs, and they have a lot of performance pressure, right? And we have an hour. So the achiever in me is we got to get something accomplished because their whole life is about accomplishment, right? So we know what our coaching objectives are. Okay, so we need to achieve something. Hold it. No, I think they're smart enough to know why we're here. And I'm very clear with people. You drive the agenda. I do not show up when we have a coaching session and say, okay, this is what we're going to work on today. It's incumbent upon you to show up and say, hey Joe, this is what I'd like to coach on today. And my goal is to be present. And I've got all of these ingredients like mom sauce. There are a whole bunch of different things, right? Okay. But I am not leading with any one thing. I just want to be present. And if I can offer something that creates resonance, that moves them along and moves them in the direction that they know they need to go in, then mission accomplished.
Yeah, I like the magic H sauce, though. You were saying human before. So I've been, for some reason, the last couple of years, I've been having a lot of conversations that begin or end with, I think we need to put a little more of the H back in HR. So important.
Hugely important. I think was it Thoreau who said most men, and that's an all-inclusive term, right? Most men live their lives in quiet desperation. We're all just we're just trying to figure it out. Life is hard. Life is glorious, but life is hard. I'm trying to raise a family. I'm trying to make it through in this environment I find myself in work-wise, I mean, and much of that I know for me at times has been unspoken. I'm not even speak to my spouse about it. I just carry it. I just carry it. Can my coach engage with me in a way where I feel like, oh, I can really breathe here and be
Mm.
myself?
Joe, how would people get a hold of you? What's the best way for them to find you?
LinkedIn, Joseph P. is in Paul, and then my last name, Quagliata. And also my little thing is called Accelerate 360. That's my little LLC. So it's spelled EXCELERATE, Accelerate 360. And that's between the name and that's how people would find me.
Dave, what else?
A shout out from our sponsor. Are you feeling stuck or overwhelmed? Character Matters Coaching and Consulting provides leadership coaching and consulting to empower you to overcome obstacles and reach your full potential. Visit charactermatterscoaching.com to learn more about their transformative coaching and how to get connected to Matt for your organization. Joe, thank you so much for representing, and it was just fabulous to connect with you today.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Good to be with you.
Thank you, Joe. Until next time, have a great afternoon. Thanks for listening. If you love this podcast, please share it with another coach or leader. Make sure you go to the show notes to get all the resources from today's episode.